Hi everybody, I'm going to do a quick chapter recaps for you for the first week so that you get an idea of those topics that are especially important to know about. So this will be a very quick overview. If it takes me beyond the capacity of a video length, I will just go into a part two. I'll let you know that at the end of the video as I'm approaching it. So basically what we have is chapter one, and chapter one talks a whole lot about being the risk taker, and the risk taker of why you would want to go into or start your own business versus working for someone else. So the course, the text in particular, takes the premise of, if you're going to start a business, then you have to be willing to take the risk. You are the entrepreneur, and all that goes with that. So it follows through that premise, what you would need to know in order to set up a business. So if you go into your chapter one, the basic things for starting a business are to have a particular good or service that you're willing to exchange or provide for the marketplace in exchange for money. So that's the basics of every business. So when you're doing your business idea, the critical thing that you have to have is a well-defined either product or service. From what you all have been submitting as your business ideas, there's some good ones out there. I had a question posed to me in one of the emails that I got about, this is a simple idea. It doesn't have to be complex, but your business plan does have to be, have some depth to it. So basically you have the concept of risk, and in return for that, if you are a sole proprietor or one of somebody who has a limited partnership, whatever the case may be, you share in the profits or maybe even have more, all of them. And you do incur the losses that go with that. So sometimes the risk doesn't go your way. It goes into the negative scope. It doesn't mean it has to stay there, but it definitely has the pros and cons when you have a business. I'm going to be looking at the book too, just to keep track along with you. Concept of profit and loss is, the money that you make that exceeds your costs of doing business. So your revenue, which is your income stream has to be enough to sustain your business. So there are variations on the theme. Some companies run as nonprofits or not-for-profits. That doesn't mean they don't make money. They sure do. It's just the way that they allocate it in terms of whether they share it with other stakeholders in the industry or the business, or whether they keep it tightly held within the organization. So people get confused with that. Not-for-profit doesn't mean that these companies don't make money. They absolutely do. Stakeholders are all the people involved in an enterprise that can share in either making money or losing money in this. So if you have a stake in a company, then you are a stakeholder. So that's an important concept to know. The book talks about the 5 factors of production. Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and knowledge. That's something to consider. But probably one of the more important parts of chapter one is the business environment. And it goes into 5 various business environments. The elements of the economic and legal environment, the technology environment, the competitive environment, the social environment, and the global business environment. Considerations for any business, but especially one starting up, is, how, for instance, the economic and legal, how much regulation, how much compliance, how many different governing bodies do you have to get approvals for, or whatever the case may be. So companies that manufacture pharmaceuticals, the financial organizations and all of those are very highly regulated, and you have to know what is involved in your industry. The technology environment, always changing. There's a lot of disruptors out there, and because of technology, things like you think of Airbnb, for instance, as a disruptor to the hoteling industry. They would not be able to do what they do if it weren't for social media and technology and the pervasiveness that we have for interacting with each other in e-commerce section. So those types of things do matter. Even something as ubiquitous as the pizza industry in America is very much a technology-driven company. If you think of the fact that there's one company, it's either Papa John's or Pizza Hut, I forget which one it is, wants to be able to order pizza from anywhere. So they want you to be able to do it, from your phone, that's easy. From your computer, that's easy. But if you're in Facebook and you want to order a pizza, they want to be able to have all that level of connectivity in there. So the technology ramifications of that in order to handle the ordering needs and of the masses is very prevalent. The social environment is important, and also the global business environment. If you intend to do something that has tie-ins to other countries, their laws, their regulations, the import-export guidelines, tariffs and the like, you have to know all of those things, plus the cultural issues that go with that. Sometimes you have a great idea and it just doesn't fly in another country because of social ramifications and of cultural ramifications. There's a lot of different things to think about when it comes to culture. It's not just what people eat. It's not just their religion. It's the way they interact with each other. It's the dynamics between men and women. It's the dynamics that we have with work ethic, understanding of time concepts, all of these things. It's very, very, very interesting and complex to consider. So it's something to think about. There's a lot to be made in the global market. However, there's a lot of considerations for that. One other thing to remember in the social, in your demographics. So you have your age demographics. So you have a lot of older citizens coming up every year. More and more people are getting older. It's kind of like a graying situation of America, where the baby boomers are all coming up now and becoming senior citizens. And the purchase that they have, this is the last generation of people who will have a steady income from like a pension type of money that will be available in their older age. So, we have about, at this point, only about 1/4 of working Americans have some kind of a defined contribution or a pension at their readiness when they go to retire. And that's going to have a profound impact on people who have to have self-funded. Most of the people who will have pensions going forward will be those who worked in the government sector. So they will be your teachers, your firemen, your policemen, and those types of things. But many of the social security, financial, I guess you could say, what's the word I'm looking for? Constructs that were provided for long-going monetary, the continuation of monetary input, they've been removed. So you have to self-manage that through a 401k or 403b or whatever is available to you. Or some people are just self-funding their own retirement. But that's going to have ramifications as the next generation gets older. They won't have that unless they have prudently saved along the way. They won't have that regular source of income that a lot of folks have now. So that's about it for chapter 1. Read these chapters because all of the material within them is subject to being part and parcel to being on one of the exams coming up. Hi folks, a little bit about chapter 2 and understanding the economics. So this is a high-level chapter, but it does have some good information in it. Basically, it talks about the concept of supply and demand in regards to economic framework. So there's some good information in here. I would strongly suggest taking a good look at this. The important parts for understanding it from a business concept. When you have a capitalism, which is basically you have the four basic rights: the right to own your property, the right to own and build a business, freedom of competition, and freedom of choice. So you have those basic tenets of the foundations of capitalism. And basically, America likes to think of itself as a capitalistic nation. We do allow and try to foster independence in businesses, or whatever the case may be. A lot of our wealth, if you look at the oil companies, the railroads, and those types of things, the old Carnegies and the Gettys and those folks, they all were the fathers of capitalism at that point. There's a little bit more regulation and taxation now that hinders some things, but you still have people who have managed to accomplish great feats of capitalism. If you look at our tech companies, Dell, Hewlett Packard, I think these are the things that come to the forefront right now. Apple, Microsoft, all those folks. So you have your, I think it's page 37 here. You have your economic concepts of supply and demand, and then the equilibrium and setting your market price. So when you're doing your business plan, it's something to think about. What are you going to set your market price for? There's concepts around that. Some people like to be low price providers, and they will deal and make up their revenue stream will be complemented by volume, and that's how they're going to maintain their profitability. Other companies will have a higher price point, and their target market or their audience will be higher paid consumers, and they will have fewer sales, but still maintain a profitability in terms of revenue because they're catering to a higher socioeconomic group. So think of the difference between somebody who's buying a Honda versus somebody who's buying a Lamborghini. It's that kind of thing. Millions and millions in masses sold, very few but high priced. So you have those types of things, but the market will, through supply and demand and economics that go with that, if the supply is high and the demand is low, then there has to be a price adjustment. If just the opposite, if the demand is high, did I say that? The demand is low and the price is high, there'll be a price adjustment. So you have to think of these things and how they work out. Competition, something to think about is you have your perfect competition is when there's a match between supply and demand and those who are providing those services to the or goods and services to the marketplace. And then a lot of conversation around, you'll hear these if you listen to the business reports that are out there, you'll hear, oh, this is an oligarchy or this is a monopoly or whatever the case may be. So lately there's been a whole lot of talk about some mergers of healthcare companies and like, let's say, drugstores. So CVS just recently put forth a bid to buy Aetna. So in doing that, what they're thinking about doing is creating a healthcare conglomerate where people will go for the goods and services from their healthcare provider through the insurer and then buy their product needs from CVS. And vice versa. CVS also has its Minute clinics and those kinds of things. So they're going to think about providing through the insurance network coverage. So there's people who are against this type of merger and acquisition, and there's people who are very much pro it. So depending on what side of the fence you are, what side of the aisle you're on, will make a determination of whether you think this is a good idea or bad, whether you think that that's way too much control for one organization has on probably, I don't know, a couple million, if more, potential covered lives, they call that, in the insurance business. These things come about all along, and when there's the feeling that too few companies have control over a sector, there's always talks of monopoly. So, you have your big communications giants out there now. You have your Comcast and your Verizon and there's all those different types of providers. When there's too few of them and it reduces the competition and fair pricing and all of that, then people get a little bit concerned about moving towards monopolisticness. So there's always talk about keeping the market free and open. That's a big deal in America. We do like to have our choices when it comes to purchasing goods and services. The book also talks about socialism and communism. Interesting read. I think that some of the things that are a concern to folks is that there's a concern that is America moving towards too much towards a mixed economy. Are we moving away from a capitalistic structure into one where we have some state-run services and goods provided to us? Some people don't want to have any government involved in any of the businesses that are out there, and other people think that a blend of it is probably a good idea in terms of regulation and control and protectionism. So we have to play that fine line here and stay true to, I think, what the guidelines or the goals of the country are. But certainly people who realize that there is a socialistic factor behind things like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, federal prison systems, all of those types of things are things that people sometimes feel as though should be government monitored versus in the private sector. I think there's concerns about whether or not the profit issue and whether the human component of having greed in our basic makeup is something that we have to contend with, and how will we go about that. So for those of you who are really thinking about starting a business, there's a couple of things that you should be aware of that are considered indicators in the economic indicators. So you have your gross domestic product, which is the total value of the services of all goods and services provided in the country in a given year. But those indexes that are your inflation and your price indexes, your frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, cyclical unemployment, and seasonal unemployment, those are all indicators of how strong or weak the economy may or may not be. And they help to basically gauge the health of the economy at a given time. There's also the concepts of inflation, deflation, stagflation, that are things to recognize. So some of these things, if you start to watch the finance shows or whatever the case may be, they will talk about whether something is a leading or a lagging indicator. So if you are going into a service provider situation where you're depending upon somebody's income to support your business venture. So let's just use the example of a pet sitter service. I can't remember if somebody actually picked this or not, but it's an easy one to relate to this. So in boon times, people will spend for their animals, and they always spend for their animals because we have Americans have a big heart for our pets. But we will go on vacations, for instance. If you go on vacation, you need a pet sitter, you need a kennel, you need some kind of care for your animal. So we will open up our wallets and pay somebody to do that. However, if there's some kind of a recession or a depression and travel goes down, the need for that kind of service goes down. And that will impact the revenue stream coming in for that type of a business. So somebody will still eat, they'll still go to work, they'll still buy gas for their car. Those types of things will still get done in a lower or repressed or depressed economy. But those things that are above and beyond need and get into want will be affected by that. So that's just a real high level understanding of that. The business cycle goes boom, recession, depression, and recovery. Okay, it's explained on 48, something good to know in terms of pricing. There's a section in the book on fiscal policy and monetary policy. Remember that monetary policy is the management of money, supply and demand through the Federal Reserve. That's where that is, and fiscal policy is is not the same thing. So there's two different concepts there, and just make sure you understand the differences of them. Just if I can give you a hint on using your book as a study tool. When I went to school, one of the things that I did was I used to highlight all the bold words and understand that, the definitions of all my words. If there were, in the sides of your books, there's columns that have key IDs for terminology. Sometimes it's just a definition, sometimes it's a concept. Now all of those. And one of the things that's nice about this book is that it gives you a couple summary pages at the end of each chapter. And if you can just make sure after you read the chapter, you go back, you go, oh, this, I don't understand this concept, go back and read that section. It's a good idea for you to do that. Okay, so just a little bit of a helpful hint there. In case anybody who's back new to come to school and you've forgotten some basic skill set, these are helpful. Okay, that's chapters 1 and 2. I'm going to break at this point for this video and then start the next 1 or 2 chapters.